Good afternoon, councillors. We will make a start. We do have a quorum and it is bang on time. A number of people want to get away at 3, so we'll get cracking. The next item on the agenda is the General Manager's report. Do you want to introduce anything in specific? We will assume that you've read it, and there's something just been circulated on the Tourism Fund. I'll let Lance introduce his report.
I've got two things. I actually want to introduce a person first. So standing up now is Jeff Turkington, who's our new Visitor Destinations Manager. So Jeff will be coordinating the zoo, the museum and the gardens, working with Peter Cherie and Perrin. Jeff comes from a commercial background with Sky City and Sky Tower in Sydney, and also with the Newcastle City Council, looking after sort of a combination of facilities that would be in my portfolio and Sean Murray's portfolio, so he comes with a wide breadth of experience. And the aim of his role is to really enhance those 3 visitor destinations we have for council, and working with Hamilton Waikato Tourism and other partners. The second thing, look, I'll take my report as read. The one thing I will talk about is probably the recommendation, and I know it sounds a bit broad, and Lisa, our funding manager's sitting at the back there. There's the Tourism Infrastructure Fund, the government one, which councillors may be aware of. You've probably seen some profile around that. They had their first round of applications back in September last year. They're likely to, we just found out that they're likely to open up to a round in the near future. They haven't said what the near future means, and we believe that we should potentially look at external funding for Hamilton Gardens and or Waiwhakariki projects. Now, you might think, well, yes, they're in the LTP, they're still got to go through a consultation process. The criteria allows us to actually apply for funding towards those types of projects, subject to a consultation process and that being finally ticked off. So they've adjusted the criteria for this fund because they had a number of, quite a bit of feedback from local government entities in the year before last, with around then that the timeframes are way too tight. They couldn't meet annual plan cycles and things like that. So some of the councils, like down on the west coast and that sort of thing, who have issues with car parking and toilets, you know, struggled to actually get applications in just because of the way that they'd structured it. So they've been a bit more flexible in the way they've structured applications. So normally we'd bring applications and funding plans to this committee, as you're aware, around you know, one that we had late last year around playgrounds and that sort of thing. But if this gets announced in the very near future and we can't meet a committee or a council meeting, we just want to have the ability to actually put forward an application for one of those projects so we don't miss out. Obviously we would report back as soon as possible to the committee or council retrospectively. Look, we may be okay, we might be able to bring all that information to a committee and that sort of thing. We just wanted to lock in that resolution, and obviously I'd keep councillors up to date through an email or through executive update on an application. Look, there's a few other things in there around Central Library and Waterworld upgrades and that sort of thing, and just some prelim work we're doing, just getting ahead of the LTP. Not that we're trying to make presumptions around the result of public consultation or your decision making, but just so that we are prepared if certain things get ticked off in that process, such as the Hamilton Gardens development charge entry, and also the Rotorua Library and Community Hub. We're doing a bit of pre-work around that, just with staff time. I'll leave it there, Madam Chair. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. There are a few questions. If we can stick to the questions, and there's a number of items everyone can have debate on, that would be great. Councillor Mallett.
Thank you. Paragraph 1, Lance, we talk about the Rotorua Community Hub. Can you distinguish that from the Rotorua Town Centre?
So the town centre, and I wasn't at the Finance Committee meeting the other day, I think in one of the major project updates around the CDP, there's the whole town centre there.
Sorry, CDP?
Comprehensive Development Plan, which is a requirement of our district plan. So we're working with Kirkdale Investments with that plan for the town centre, which is essentially retail, roading, shops, light industrial and also community facilities. The community hub is actually pretty much council's part of that. We've bought a footprint, I think we've showed.
So the community hub is a subset of the town centre?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty much what we own and predicated on what was discussed during the LTP, which was a library, town square, and we've got a piece of land adjacent to our park land that runs up to the school, which is available for an aquatic facility. And as we said, we'll be seeking expressions of interest from a private provider for that facility.
Okay. What would a town square be?
Anything from the promenade bit that goes down into Victoria on the River to Garden Place. So basically it's a public open space in a built-up area. So and each area would have its own particular characteristics depending on how it's designed.
And I don't know anything about what Kirkdale are going to do with the town centre in terms of that, or what our plans are, but presumably they will want to provide some amenity anyway, won't they? And so would that, I guess if they're going to provide it, we might as well not provide it and save some money. If they are going to provide it, I don't know.
Well, they will provide some amenity around the retail, but in basically the planning we've gone through, then there's a commitment, and also the agreements we've signed, there's a commitment from council to actually provide some of that space. How much we provide is still open to going through design and that sort of thing. Obviously, we will work closely with the developers, because the key thing is probably what we've learnt, just recently from VOTR, is actually activating the edges is really important, and doing that in partnership with people in the commercial sector is probably one of the better ways to go.
Okay, thank you. Just a pet peeve of mine, a PP of mine. Can we, again, I raise this frequently, we've got things going to be done late January, things going to be done in February, can we always put the year in? Because you lose context in a couple of months after the report's been received. Yeah,
good point.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and I noticed Fletcher Construction mentioned a couple of times, and I'm not being a smart ass or anything. We're all comfortable with working with them. They're all tickety-boo.
Yes, as we speak, they're working on both projects. They've made a pretty good start at Waterworld. I was there personally last week. I actually think they're ahead of schedule a little bit at Waterworld, just with some of the stuff they've got to pull up. Just if you've been reading what's in obviously there's been some media coverage around their situation. So we have a number of bank bonds involved in those two contracts, which essentially, if they aren't able to continue and complete the projects, then those bank bonds will provide us the resources to actually get the job finished.
Oh, okay. So that bank bond would be a third party, not Fletcher's, and so Fletcher's would pay the bank to provide that insurance, and the bank would make good to us should Fletcher's fail somewhere along the line.
Yeah, okay. Something to that degree. I don't know all the actual detail, but I think you've given a pretty good summary around that.
It would be useful to know a little bit more clarity about those, because I've got no idea of whether Fletcher's is going to tip over tomorrow, or it's going to be with us for another 100 years. But we have been alluded to some issues in that company, and if we have some exposure to them, it would be good to know that what the nature of that exposure was.
Yeah, please. So I can get Scott Copeland to probably just draft something up and put out an executive update to councillors if people are particularly interested in that. We've made sure that Scott's been very aware of the situation and made sure that we were protected in that way going forward, which is not unusual for all our contracts, to be honest.
Okay, thank you. And last one, paragraph 19 talked about a requirement for more shade. I'm surprised that we didn't factor that in. I mean, I'm not the guy who designs these things, so I don't have any expertise in that, but I would have thought nowadays that sort of development, having some decent shade would be kind of de rigueur.
Yeah, there's two bits. Obviously, the top bit, there's some trees being planted when, next to Barn Me, that bit outside Barn Me, and as you go down that avenue bit there, so there's some trees there which will provide shade during the summer period. Further down, had a look at that, and we're really just leaving that as an option around value management exercise around the budget. We've come in, as I said earlier this morning, we've come in under, so we can actually put some shading in there, which is like they're not sailcloths, they're actually a different type of technology where there's basically some ripple effect type shading, which is provided by a stand with a ripple roof on it.
Okay. When we do a development like this, like an open outside space like this, do we, as part of kind of the format or the template for these things, include shade?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So people want more shade than than our standard format or template provided for. And you may not know the answer.
No, I'll wind this back. There was shade always planned in it, but in projects, if you are trying to meet budget, then sometimes these components removed that you can actually put in later on, when budgets or funding allows. That's what's happened in this, and then we've actually found that we can now include that in the project to actually finish it, so they will be put in.
Okay. I take it from the reason you've reported this is that you've sort of assessed that it is reasonable that people should want more shade than is currently there, because people can moan about all sorts of things. I mean, it's not just a gripe; it is a reasonable expectation. There should be more shade there.
Yeah, and we've received we've had feedback on it, and I think probably when it was opened, it was that really hot period as well. So I think that probably accentuated the feedback that we got. And to be fair, it was all polite and constructive feedback, people just saying, how could we enhance it further? And the other feedback we've had is that people are really pleased that we're putting in the artwork as well. Okay,
thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bunting.
Oh, sorry, no, my question was around Fletcher's, and we're going to be updated on that as it goes. I'm happy, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Henry.
I've got a couple of questions, and one of the is with the peak. How old is the floor that it has to be?
How old?
Yeah.
It was opened in July.
Yeah.
And so in all projects you'll get issues, and you go through what they call a defects period.
Okay.
Look, it wasn't expected that some of the lines would start coming off.
Yeah.
It sounds like they had a bit of an issue when it was laid, some technical issues. But as part of that defects period, then the construction company is actually liable to remedy any issues, and that's what's happened in this case.
Okay.
I'm really pleased with where they've got to.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you've been up there recently, but the floor lacquer looks a lot thicker than what it was.
Okay. So is there a cost to us or not really?
No cost to council.
No cost to us.
So,
okay.
no.
No, that's fine. The other question is planning for proposed hammer guns development and charged entry, although we haven't made any decisions on that. It sounds a little bit similar to what we had last week about preparing everything for peacocks before we actually know. So are we going? I know we need to prepare, but on the other hand, we're not 100% sure whether we're going to get there. If that makes sense,
Yeah, but so what we're doing is just getting ahead of the game, and charging entry for just a certain part of the visitation has some challenges and some complications, and what Jeff and the team have been doing is leveraging off the report we had from Horworth, who talked about some of that, but Jeff's also been talking to Maritime Museum and other places where there's entry is charged to some people and not others. So it's actually just working through all the practicalities of that, because that'll actually also determine how we operate, how many staff we have, and also how we design certain facilities, such as the information centre about getting flow of people in and out. So just really getting ahead of the game, notwithstanding the fact that we do have to go through public consultation, but that work won't be wasted going forward. So I think it'll give us some good information. And if council decides not to charge entry now, it may decide to do that in the future at some other stage.
Okay, and the last question is about the Tourism Infrastructure Fund. You feel quite confident that we could do something with that with Waiwhakariki?
Yeah, so we're talking about car park toilets and things like that, and we've had a look at the fund and the criteria, and we believe that we would have an opportunity to apply for that. I think some elected members, when the fund first came out, actually did ask us the question. Like I said, they've actually amended the criteria since then, and I think it's a bit more friendly to councils like Hamilton rather than councils that are in more far-flung corners of New Zealand.
Okay.
Obviously, we don't have freedom camper issues like some other places do.
We might have when we have the toilets. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Thanks, Paula. Lance, just with that Tourism Infrastructure Fund application, I'm just looking there, I've put my glasses back on, where it says applications are expected to co-fund to the maximum extent they are able, and projects will not be eligible, blah, blah, blah. So you've got to put up your own money. So with something like Waiwhakariki, what happens in the LTP, it could get knocked back. I think we've got 600 or 700 there that we've put up in operational funding, haven't we? Which I know probably about 0.5% in rates.
Yeah, capital and there's some OPEX as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's say that gets knocked back in LTP, then it's a wasted application for that, isn't it?
Yeah, it'll be. I wouldn't call it a wasted application. I'd say it's a missed opportunity. But I think if we don't get in, then we can't leverage off that opportunity if it comes. So they're well aware that we would have to go through our process, and if we don't get it approved, then obviously we'd withdraw our application or they'd decline it. There's some similar thing happened with the Huntavasa gallery in Whangarei, where they actually got granted a significant capital project fund from lotteries, and then the council voted against funding. That council of the day voted against it, and now they've had a change of council and they voted for it, and they're luckily enough have got the funding.
Right. So we're looking at that, but we're also possibly looking at something at Hamilton Gardens by the look of your report.
Yeah, that's correct. So what we'll do is look at. To be honest, we'll look at what is the best fit and the best project, and then we would make a call on whether we just put in one application or we put in applications for both.
Okay.
We might do the latter. Obviously we don't want to be greedy, but I'd have to say that a lot of the funders have a lot of confidence in Hamilton City Council. We've put in some significant applications over the last 3 or 4 years, the gardens included, for Lottery's significant capital project fund. We got 2.5 million for that. We got the largest grant in that round 2.5 years ago. So they've got a lot of confidence that A, we're putting skin in the game, and B, we actually deliver on what we say we're going to do.
Okay. And in terms of time frame, are we likely to know before LTP, June, July, or is it likely to be after that, the time frame?
We'll have to ask Lisa that one.
It's really hard to say at this stage. As Lance mentioned earlier, we're unsure of when the fund will actually open, and if it opens in the form that it is now. There has been talk that it might open as a potentially new round or amalgamated, based on the new government.
Okay.
So there are a couple of considerations moving forward. So all we know is, I suppose, what they've put out, and have indicated last year that first quarter of this year the fund will open.
Okay.
The priority statement will come out,
My experience, it takes 3 to 4 months for them to process all the applications.
Right, so it's unlikely probably, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And the other one was the planning for proposed Hamilton Gardens charged entry. How disruptive has this planning that we've been doing, how disruptive is it? Because I sort of get reports that it is quite disruptive down there. Is it affecting visitor numbers or?
Well, the planning's not disruptive because it's basically 3 people in a back room. We've had a bit of a drop in numbers over summer.
Yeah.
And we're not overly sure about what it is. Anecdotally, some people are saying it's been the really hot conditions. Just recently, Peter was saying, like the weather in February hasn't been great, whereas in, November, December, January, it was amazing. And the museums actually had good figures because people have enjoyed going into the air conditioning. Is it that there's misinformation out there around that we're already charging?
Yep.
We're hearing a few comments to that effect, but I'd have to say all this is anecdote, so we don't actually know at the moment. So I think once we've worked through that process, then we just need to make sure our communications is very clear and my view is I think we have been very clear in our communications, and obviously if something gets, comes up on Facebook or anything like that, then obviously Jeff and the team respond pretty quickly. So, but you know what it's like, you can get a rumour out there and it becomes folklore, either quickly or slowly.
Yeah, so there has been some sort of drop-off in patronage at the themed gardens already?
To the enclosed gardens, yes.
Yeah, since December, since that even the announcement that we might do it.
Oh, and before that too, and that's why we're a bit wary about what are the reasons for that.
Yeah, okay. All right, thanks, Lance.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Casson.
Yeah, thanks, Lance. Only 2 questions I got. Waterworld 1011. I remember in our 2017 Waterworld update, we were informed that the work would be pretty hard to complete over the winter months because of the water table rising during winter. But I see the work is now going through, obviously, the winter period. And my question is, after the recent deluge and rains we've had, does it pose any potential risk for damage to the pools rising out after they've been drained?
I'll get Debbie to come up and answer that question. She'll know better than me.
So we're monitoring the groundwater. Yeah, so we're doing regular tests of the groundwater, and if the groundwater gets too high, we'll put in pumps which pump the water out.
Oh,
Yeah.
from
So
the ground.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool.
The key thing is that there's a hydrostatic pressure and we don't want the tank to pop out of the ground.
Yeah.
So they basically, if there's any water around it, they'll pump it out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. And the second one here is just the proposed Hamilton Gardens development charge fees. Has there been, when you're doing the planning for this, has there been any thought in regards to a better positioned donation box than what we have at the moment, because it's kind of hidden around the side in the bushes? So has there been any thought about moving or putting a donation box right in the middle of the courtyard as you walk in, making it fun and interactive for people to put money into, to invite a little bit more money to go into those boxes?
Yeah, Jeff and Peter have been doing a lot of thinking on that recently, and looking at pay wave as well, because a lot of tourists don't always carry cash, but quite often they'll have a card and that sort of thing. So the answer is yes, and we're looking at options of, if charge entry doesn't go ahead, then how best do we do that going forward, where you get the best visibility of that opportunity for people to make a donation, and we've got a novel idea of how we might do that and encourage people to do that, which I won't tell you the detail of yet because we've still got to think it through.
Okay. And just at the front where all the tour buses end up going, with people passing through Hamilton on their way to Rotorua, obviously. Have a lot of tour buses sitting at the front there that obviously they offload, the people go to the toilets, so it's quite cheap for them, and then they hop back on the bus and go again. Any thoughts of putting charging points out there in the car park for the buses?
That was one of the options we put in the paper to council and the LTP, and council decided not to go for that because one of them was, do we charge for parking instead of paid entry at the gate of the enclosed gardens? That's something we can look at as well if need be. I think there's a bit of water to go under the bridge, and it's just about what's the best way of harnessing the tourist bus market, and how do we how do we get some revenue from that? What's the best way of doing that? I think we just need to be reasonably clever and subtle around that, rather than just doing something which seems obvious but might have a detrimental effect. We think the shop is something where we can really, and value added such as tours, and the Friends are doing some really good tours at the moment, and numbers have been increasing, guided tours that is, and obviously we're working with Darren Mills too for a wider tour of the gardens, the river, and once we get the jetty upgrade into the CBD area, then we think there's more potential for adding to that as well. Happy to talk to you offline about all the detail.
Okay.
Councillor O'Leary?
Madam Chair, we should just charge for the toilets. The OTR, side question I guess. Lance, I had a notification for the businesses that have come together to come up with some funds for events in that space. And down the bottom of the poster, it had a sponsor was Hamilton City Council. This council decided not to put in any funds for that events program. So what are we sponsoring? Do you know?
No, I don't. I'm not sure if Maria or Tracy might be involved in that.
Was that the one, Councillor O'Leary, on Facebook, the blue one with the summer series? And
Yeah, that was it, yeah.
Tracy was leading that piece of work. My understanding is that the sponsorship is coordination of the events in the space bookings, and that's not the financial contribution.
So I'm just highlighting that as an area of concern for me. The fact that we're allowing them to do stuff in the space is great, and that they're funded, but we put a cost on staff time, on some of it, chairs and tables and all of those things. So I'm just raising a little bit of a concern there for someone to make sure that that clearly doesn't happen. Lance, under the gardens, you said there around that planning needs to go forward, and so that we're able to progress swiftly should the proposal go through the LTP. I raised an earlier last week with finance around us doing a similar thing with the HIF, but I think with this is slightly different, isn't it? Because the proposal that you brought to us in the LTP was based on a quantum of money, and then during that debate process that money was cut in half. So that program of works needs to come back to us at some point, because that would be cut in half as well, I'm assuming. Is that where you're going with that work?
The bit that's cut in half wouldn't affect the amount, the $1 million we'll spend on the information centre and putting in the infrastructure for charged entry. So yes, we need to bring back the whole business plan and the business case so you know all the detail. But what we're doing is just pretty much all that prelim work that I talked about before, just all the thinking, so that we're not talking to you guys a year later, like on July the 1st, 2019, and we still haven't got paid entry up and operating, or the information centre upgraded. So it's just all the preliminary work to be prepared, and if the decision's not to have paid entry, then a lot of that work won't be wasted, but some of it wouldn't be used.
So yeah, that was my second question. that you'd have to do that preparatory work as well, because that, of course, was a casting vote for the $10 charge. So it's a close one, yeah. Okay, thank you. Thanks for your report.
Thank you. Councillor McPherson?
Thanks. Just regarding one of Angela's points, I'd like to see a copy of the resolution that was passed or not passed. I can't remember if it was just a negative or there was one actually passed regarding Victoria on the river activation money, because I have no recollection whatsoever that we said staff could not spend time doing whatever their jobs are, and certainly we've got staff that work in the events coordination space, quite independent of any resolution that we passed whether or not to give extra cash to an event. And I think it'd be really unfortunate because there's an implied criticism of a part of council or of staff members in council there, and I'd like to know exactly what that situation is.
So I'll take that as a question and either get a response to it now or someone to supply that response.
Sorry, point of order, Madam Chair. I wasn't criticising staff.
No, I polled that you weren't criticising staff. She was asking a point around what the decision was and the preparation.
No, the words said by Councillor O'Leary towards the end of that section said I'd be really, something like I'd be really upset or unhappy if staff of council were to have been doing work in that area, knowing what our decision on the funding was.
Okay, so I'm going
that's pretty close to what was said.
So I'm going to rule in favour of Councillor O'Leary's point of order, because I think what she was talking about was the governance decision underneath it. Having said that, you've raised some good points in your comments just before, which I'm going to take as a roundabout question and ask Lance to respond to.
I'd say that staff have taken initiative to utilise the kind donations that have been made by the business community. Rightly or wrongly, we didn't glean from the discussion that you didn't want entertainment there. It was that you didn't want the funding for that to go into risks and opportunities. So if we've got that wrong, then apologies for that. But you know, we like our staff to be reasonably proactive, and I think in good faith we've worked with those people who've put that money forward to actually provide some entertainment down there.
Further question, Councillor McPherson?
Yeah, that's certainly my understanding of the resolution. We voted against putting money from risks and opportunities towards that. That's all.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah, so we can check that anyway. Look, the actual questions I was going to ask were on different subjects in your report, Lance. One, relation to your comments on the peak on page 73 there, the indoor rec centre at Rotorua. What's the arrangements for completing or fixing the other glitches? You've mentioned some of the ones, mainly the floor-related glitches there, but there's still outstanding glitches and it's not clear what's happening there.
So the construction company that built the facility, like I said, are in the defects period, and there's always retentions held by the contract principal, which is the MOE, and they have until the 30th of June to remedy this is what I'm aware for the recreation centre part of it, not the rest of the school.
Yes.
They've got to remedy those by the 30th of June, that's my understanding, and then Hamilton City Council as a funder has to be satisfied that they have happened. So just to be clear, there's what the MOE built, and then the fit out of the facility for some of the equipment, like I've mentioned, the basketball goals, they were actually purchased by the trust, who got funding from New Zealand Community Trust and other philanthropic funders. And if there's any small matters with those ancillary equipment, then that's for the trust has a contract with Arrow International to sort through.
Yeah, I guess the concern is from point of view of a hirer of the organisation, they don't really care or differentiate, let's say, between the MOE part and the trust part, because they hire the facility and the associated equipment for their sport for the agreed time period. So I happen to know one particular glitch which is right through the whole place, which affects at least two sports have raised it. So I'm not trying to get that sorted here. I'm trying to find out what the process, is that within because we're hiring it out at the full rate to those sports.
Basically, that's for the trust and the centre manager to work through, and I'll talk to you offline about those. But essentially, we're trying to get those done as quick as possible. Some of those were held up by the floor because obviously machinery couldn't come in, and and all that sort of stuff. So, and now with the floor being remedied, then everyone wants to get in there and use it. So, but Liz is moving as quickly as she can. But I'll talk to you offline if there's any particular, some specific.
Don't get me wrong, it's being seen as a really, really good facility, and I saw 3 different groups using it last Saturday at the same time, hiring a different section of it, and, every gap just about seems to be being filled at the moment. So that's exactly what we hoped would happen, and it's certainly ending up like that. So
yeah, and bookings are really strong, as you say, and Liz is working on probably the midweek gaps, during, and especially with some of the other schools around there, and also a growing community and some of the different ethnicities. Can we get a couple of those courts activated during Monday to Friday, 8 till 3 in the afternoon, from maybe elderly groups or whatever, I think that's the key thing now. And the other thing is holiday programs too during the school holidays.
So I think we just in the interest of time, stick to the questions now and pursue some of that conversation offline.
Well, my second question was actually going to be related to one of those. There's a school 500 metres away, Hamilton Christian School, has no indoor sports facilities that were asking me as a sport organiser whether they could use it. So I think that's someone, if you could pass that on.
Yep.
Please. Yep. And the other part of my question related to the Rotatuna Community Hub, which Gary also raised, though from a different viewpoint, on page 74. We had quite a discussion, which I think you said you weren't here for at Finance last week, or wherever it was, maybe 2 weeks ago, and that was not just about the community hub, that was about the Rotatuna Town Centre design. So, but you've referred only to the community hub, i.e. the building or facility we're going to own or contract out. So there was a request that we actually have a look at the entire, but you're then talking about the agreements that are already signed, which is not something we were told when we raised it a week or 2 ago.
The agreements around the land purchase and the overall town centre development. Most of that's around process, but I think what came up the other day is coming back to a briefing next week, or Helen gave me an update just this morning, and it's coming back to a briefing as soon as possible.
Yeah, I just wanted assurance that it wasn't just the part we own.
No, it's the whole lot. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Ta.
Councillor Hamilton.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Lance, just in regards to the proposed charge entry to the gardens, what, if any, conversations have been had with the Hamilton Gardens Trust?
With the Development Trust?
Yeah, with John Dobson and John Tanner and co.
Extensive. So Peter Segal's been talking to them all the way through, and also the Friends have had discussions with them as well. So we've got some further discussions coming up with both parties. My understanding is that the views within those groups differ, and there's actually a range of views, just probably like there is in the wider population. So yeah, we'll continue to have those discussions. But if you've got someone who feels that they haven't had those discussions, then I can talk to you offline about that and catch up with them.
You done, Councillor Hamilton?
Thank you.
That's fine. Okay, everybody happy with that? So we'll move to the recommendations. One's just to receive the report, and the other one's to delegate authority to the General Manager to submit the appropriate funding application. Councillor Casson so moves. Do I have a seconder? Happy to second it, to put it out there. Oh, Councillor Henry's happy to second that. Any comment, debate? Councillor Casson is the mover. You, no. Councillor Henry, no. Anybody else want to comment on it? No. And then we'll go to the vote, please. Perfect. What's the result of that coming? Somebody not voted? Somebody not pressed your button? Okay, cool. Perfect. Thank you very much, Council. We'll now move on to the next item, which is around the draft open space provision policy. Please. Okay, so well, if you can, you councillors, you should have had enough time to read this, and so we'll take it as read. But if you would like to, Jamie, just outline the key elements that you would like us to focus our attention on, that's great too.
Sure, thanks. I'll take that opportunity just to point out a couple of things. So the policy has been developed out of an action from Council's Open Spaces Plan. The Open Spaces Plan sets the kind of high-level vision and goals for the city's open spaces, with the policy essentially providing the detail on how and what type of open spaces will be delivered as the city grows, and provides the required clarity to developers in this space, which is currently lacking a little. The development of this policy has drawn on similar policy approaches developed by other growth councils, particularly Auckland, who have done a lot of work in this space. The staff recommendation is that council consult the public and key users of this policy to assist in the refinement of the policy. So I intend on both putting it out to the public for any comment, but also doing some key stakeholder engagement with some of the key developers around town through our key account managers here at council.
Perfect. So it's a work in progress here. If there's any feedback, I guess from councillors, rather than to take up a lot of time here, you'd be more than happy for individual councillors to come and talk to you. Yeah, we have had some briefings on that, but if there's something that now that it's in print, they're happy with. I just have one very quick question myself. I guess my concern is, and it's just around the quantum of public space and where that gets dealt with. I'm concerned and want to have some kind of protection mechanism in here, and it might be in here, apologies for bringing this up, around reduction of public space by creep. You know, so like things can get a little smaller or traded off or what have you, and then eventually as a city per capita we have less public space than we once had. What protects that, if I might know?
A couple of points there. I guess in our open spaces plan, which is already adopted, there, I can't recall if it's a principle or a goal, but it's no net loss of open space.
Okay. Perfect.
So there's that protection. I guess the protection in terms of any sale or disposal of open space, there's quite a defined prescriptive policy, process that's in the Reserves Act. And you have Local Government Act kind of obligations there in terms of decision making as well.
Okay, so if there was some public land to be sold off, the overall quantum, that no net loss would be reported to us, how we would offset any loss that was...
That would definitely be one of the things addressed in any report in response to a proposed disposal of land.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Henry?
Look, I just want to, when you talked about the background, and it is also anticipated that the city's boundary will be extended, and I know Deputy Mayor Gallagher talks about that all the time. Is there any, I've never really checked it, have we got any vision or any goal when that expansion will happen, or is it just we keep on, and it's probably not for you, Jamie, it's probably more for Lance too. Is there a goal when we're going to have some expansion for the city, or is it just a continual talk on that?
Are you talking about expansion of the land area?
Yeah, the
geographic
land area, yeah, the land area.
I think we have some agreements in place through, and Councillor McPherson might be able to help me here, around future proof.
Yep, so currently we have an agreement with Waikato District Council for 2 areas, and they kick in 2039 or 2041 for expansion. So that's the area above K Road up to where the new expressway is going to go. That's called HT1, and then there's the area north of Ruakura that's going to be encased by the expressway there as well. So those are there in as well. Also, there has been conversations, but no agreements in place that once Southern Links expands, there's logical for parts of the boundary south of Hamilton to extend those areas as well. We have a very good relationship with our partners surrounding us, and Lance is absolutely correct from a future-proof point of view. It's always something we test, and most of the councils around here are aware that as Hamilton grows, there will need to be a reflection of that in the boundaries. But apart from those 2 specific areas that I mentioned, there's no specific plans in place.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Henry. Councillor McPherson? Councillor Gallagher?
Oh, sorry.
Councillor McPherson.
I thought you asked me because Lance mentioned, sorry. I simply wanted to move this to get on the table.
Okay, thank you for that. Do we have a seconder just while we're in machine? Councillor Bunting. Councillor Gallagher, questions?
Around the increasing density with the so-called infill, so there are now zones of Hamilton where it has significant, Frankton, Melville, etc., University Precinct. 2 questions. One, what are we doing to actually do some analysis of population for those areas that have increased dramatically, and they've increased on the basis that people don't have a backyard or because it's all apartments? And then the other question is, what work are we doing with the schools in our areas to see if we can get access or maintain open access to school fields as against, walking around the buildings? Because obviously, as you're aware, a number of schools have unilaterally closed off their grounds, which means that deprives the neighbourhood of weekend green space. I'm just wondering what work we're doing in that area.
I can definitely speak to the first one, and Lance may be able to assist on the second question. When it comes to, I guess, in terms of the policy, in terms of access for those areas that are targeted for intensification or infill, the position of the policy is that as long as every resident is within 500 metres walking distance of a neighbourhood park, which is roughly 0.5 hectares, so enough to kind of do your informal recreation, so forth, then we feel that we would be meeting a good level of service. In terms of work to understand how the provision in those spaces that are targeted for intensification, that's probably the next step after this policy, to do a open space network plan that looks at provision at a finer grain to understand the quality of those spaces and whether there are any potential improvements outside of maybe land provision, e.g. Transportation accessibility, putting in a walkway or doing things to actually make that space more accessible.
With the new government, if you have a school field just 200 metres away, 100 metres away, 50 metres away, and that school field can be accessible as a bit of green space for kids to kick a ball around, is that not better than them having to walk half a kilometre?
I wouldn't disagree with you that public access to any kind of green, public provider of green space would benefit the community.
So I'm just trying to work out whether we have to re-kick up the whole issue of these school grounds, and we've had this debate whether we, it's at a staff level, whether that has to happen at a political level. We've had a recent thing with the Richmond Park, for example, and we're trying to sort of get Ministry of Education and schools to join up thinking, and as I've said before, there's a difference between fencing off the buildings, plant and equipment. I get that, but it seems crazy that we have chunks of green fields.
So Martin, Lance is happy to answer.
Well, I'm asking, through Lance, I'm just trying to think what ongoing conversations can we have to actually unlock some of those fields, or at least in the new areas maintain a clear, joined up thinking.
So we have a liaison meeting with MOE every 2 months. Relevant staff from here, from planning and open spaces and different parts. Generally I'm there myself, or Kelvin used to go as well, and with officials. They've had a bit of change in officials actually in the MOE office here at Te Rapa just recently, so discussions around that, and obviously you know, the peaks come out of some of that, and the officials will steer us in the right direction to what they see are the right people at the schools. Yes, we could probably be a bit more active around those discussions. We have been concentrating on the new schools, but I think it's a good point you bring up around the existing schools. Look, we do have some arrangements with some existing schools who use our fields, we use theirs, that sort of thing. So I think it is a rekindled conversation that is starting to happen nationally. Auckland's got a major issue around open space with its burgeoning population, and Auckland Council is putting a lot of effort into talking to schools there. So it's something that we will be looking at going forward.
Can I request through the chair that you make that item in future of your GM summary report, just update us with that. Now, and basically, what we also want to know, is there any area in town for a start where people have to walk more than 500 metres? That would be an immediate thing. And what opportunities, and I've raised this before, you know, what opportunities. Now, if you've got a park slap bang next to a school, fine, but if you don't, by opening up that green space would assist, and also from a funding and using our tax dollars. But I also want to remind colleague councils that the government, as I understand it, is embarking on a major significant reform of education, and I would argue that we should be pressing the government for joined up thinking, that these decisions shouldn't just be left to the school's board of trustees. This should be part of a really joined up using public resource. I'm wondering, through the chair, GM, if you could keep us apprised of some of those developments.
I think those are good points, and we can figure out how we can get greater governance over it. Councillor Gallagher as well. So, Councillor Bunting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just harking back to the age-friendly discussion we had earlier on, and one we've got coming up with the Central City Safety Plan and that sort of stuff. And mine's question is around the filters that you go through when you're devising this. Like, for example, if we come in with a reasonably rigid age-friendly plan, and then there's a disabled plan, and there's all these filters that we have to go through, are they taken into consideration when you're drafting this up, or is this done in isolation? And is there a risk that we'll have to go back and have a look at it to make sure it's age-friendly, make sure it's disabled-friendly, make sure it's safe, all that kind of stuff? I mean, how much crosstalk is there in these things?
There definitely is crosstalk, and I think that you'll find that a lot of the high-level principles apply generically to a lot of the policy that we write. In terms of, I mean, this policy doesn't touch on the detailed design of our spaces in terms of path grades and those types of kind of really design-based kind of components to the parks. But then we have other things like the Hamilton City Council IT infrastructure technical specifications, which starts to talk about path grades and things like that. So that's kind of the next step. But I guess public consultation, great opportunity to get any of that feedback from the community around how a policy like this can respond better to...
Yeah, I'm just thinking from an efficiency point of view when you're planning that sort of stuff, you know.
We're definitely getting better in that space, in my experience.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So we'll go to the recommendation, which is just to receive the report. I'm happy to move that. Councillor... Oh, sorry. Has it... Apologies. It is free. It's the committee services received. No, I'm ahead of myself. Sorry. Prove it. Okay, cool. So you moved it, didn't you, Councillor McPherson? And Councillor Bunt?
We're doing a lot more than receiving it.
Okay, I seem to have popped up with another question. Councillor Gallagher.
No, I'm just thinking there's one for the debate.
For the debate? Cool. Mover, Councillor McPherson, you may speak first, of course.
Thank you. Moving it is that we're moving this policy for public consultation. We're not actually supposed to be debating the policy here. We will have plenty of opportunity for that, and plenty of opportunity. I agree with all the things our esteemed Deputy Mayor, our new Deputy Mayor has said, but the time for that discussion surely is once we hear the submissions. In fact, we could organise some of them to make sure we get the right ones. But we just want to get it out to the public, please.
Thank you. Councillor Gallagher.
Yes, I totally agree with everything said. And I want to give you an example. Years ago, when there was a proposal to sell a park called Dawson Park, which is now leased by the Hamilton East Primary School. So it's an example, if you like. It could be, I think we can better do, of shared school community space, Dawson Park. But you really need to reflect that there were proposals to sell green space. You need also to reflect that there were a number of other little pocket bits of green space before the intensification happened that were already sold off by previous councils, and was that a wise thing to do? You also need to be aware that, and I'm sorry to go on about this, there was a TGH submission by Bell Gully people in Wellington to say we shouldn't have more green space in new areas. So please, and that was just blatant neoliberal thinking, but please do not take for granted that everyone wants and upholds these ideals. So I'm really, like Dave Mack, I'm really looking forward to some comprehensive consultation and how we do this better. And this is all about, because of the high intensification of our city now, these common green spaces for kids to walk around, kick a ball, local playground become increasingly more important. The only other thing I'd also point out is that I think at some stage through this committee it would be good to just get an ongoing update of the undeveloped green spaces, you know, we have, you know, the park sort of been held in reserve, and, you know, the sort of the mowing strips, how we can, any open space we have oversight of, how we can maximise public enjoyment and use of that. And often with green spaces there are, of course, a staged approach, you know. And it may be that you just do a mow strip around the edge of it so people can walk around the edge of a park to be in the future. But, Madam Chair, I'm really looking forward to this consultation, because this, in my view, is totally consistent with the Hamilton Plan and what makes our city livable. And I just do the final plea, please remind ourselves that we, with intensification, which we're experiencing rapidly in this city, where more and more kids are growing up without the back lawn, it is really important that we have the public provision of those places.
Councillor Bunting.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I'm seconding this motion. I'm excited about it going out to public consultation. I am worried it will get buried with all the other consultation that people are being asked to participate in at the moment, but it's a very important policy to have out there. As the Deputy Mayor brings up, intensification is going to be the big issue as pressure on our green space grows, because everyone wants to put a house on everything, but also so will people's needs. You know, gone are the days where let's put a big green field in there and there we go, we've done our job. I'm certainly hoping we take it a little bit further. And we think, how do people play? How do people use this space? Because I know there's a great big green space up Gordonton Road that's just sat there as a big paddock for a long, long time. And I don't know how that qualifies under this policy. So I'll be really interested to see the consultation come through. But well done, and thank you for getting it done, because the pressure is going to be on our space.
Thank you. Thank you for the report and your work behind this. Look forward to it. We'll go to the vote, please, councillors.
Predicted it'll be 13-0.
Okie doke. Thank you, councillors. Now we'll move on to item 11, which is the update on bowls and croquet clubs in Hamilton. And this is for information, and it is all there. So I was going to largely take it as read, but I, of course, allow the staff the opportunity to touch on the most pertinent points for council's consideration, and then leave it for the questions, if that's okay.
Afternoon. So, yeah, we'll take the report as read. just to point out that it is an information-only report, and it's an update on bowls and croquet clubs in Hamilton. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Mallett.
This is just a bit of a sort of a salutary lesson. Is that the right word? Solitary lesson? Salutary, is it? Thank you. Regulatory, yeah. And it follows quickly after the green spaces thing that how quickly our tastes and demands change. 15, 20 years ago, New Zealand was well, maybe even a bit further ago than that, but we were a nation of bowlers. And people
There's going to
couldn't...
be a question at the end of this, isn't there?
Yeah. If you just settle down. We were a nation of bowlers. The same thing happened with squash. It just concerns me that we have just approved a process whereby, and that's going out to public consultation, so there's a check on that we're going to want people, everyone is 500 metres away from a park or something like that. The issue you've got here is a complete collapse in the demand for bowling. So I guess my point is that we need to be very, very careful that we don't assume we can predict the future. This report doesn't actually recommend anything. I noticed there's a whole lot of community leases through here. When are those coming up for discussion? Because that'll be when the rubber meets the road, isn't it?
Yeah, so the lease dates are all outlined in the attachments of when they come up for renewal, and at that point they would come before you for approval.
Okay. Okay, all right, there is two, thank you.
Councillor Henry? Thank you.
Much for the report. Look, just a question. You say here that Bowls Waikato report that there are also 5 retirement homes with outdoor bowls facilities. Do they run, I don't know whether you know that, but do they run their own bowling clubs, or is it just a facility within the retirement village?
Yeah, so what I understand from Bowls Waikato, they are not necessarily full-size greens, but they have some sort of modified or smaller outdoor bowling facilities within those retirement homes, but unlikely to be clubs, more like facilities as part of those retirement villages.
Okay. The other question with that is, I mean, if people live outside, so if they don't have access to their bowling club anymore because the leases run out and so on, can they, although they don't live in the retirement village, do you think they could use the bowling green, or could they? I don't know. Might be not for you to, for me to ask you. I might have to ask the retirement village.
I'm not sure,
itself.
but you know, there still are other bowling clubs in the city, and there's private ones as well as those that are on council land.
That's right. So they could shift somewhere else, if necessary. Thank you so much. That's all.
Thank you, everyone. So we'll move to debate if there is any.
To give us a state of the play of what's out there, isn't it? Because there's nothing, no report to it, no action required. It's just saying, look, there's and putting it bluntly, there's a whole lot of bowling clubs out there that are soon going to go defunct. Their members are passing away. They are not recruiting new people. You don't ask us to do anything, or you don't. There's no suggestion about what should happen to these properties. Most of them are council's properties that are rented or leased to these organisations.
So it was direction to staff to report back on bowls clubs in Hamilton, and it was part of the discussion when the Hillcrest Bowling Club lease application went up to council.
Okay, that's what drove it. Okay.
Yes.
I think where the rubber hits the road, Gary, for councils is when those leases come up, and if they do apply, then you will carefully need to look at the criteria in our community occupancy policy around sustainability.
Yeah.
And then the flow-on thing is if they do become defunct or decide not to reapply for a lease or licence, then what do we do with that green space?
Yeah. Because the stadium one already has...
yeah, we've still got to come back on that one, so I'm been through that EOI process on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. If there's no debate, we'll go to the vote. Not yet. Councillor Casson, seconded by Councillor Hamilton. Thank you. All in favour? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. That brings us on to, I am going to start to try and move through these last items quite quickly, councillors. Councillor Mallet, I'm going to try and move through these because a number of you have approached me saying that you have other obligations after 3-ish, and so there's no reason why we can't get through. So, welcome. Thank you. This is about the leases. This might take a little bit more time in the discussion. The details all in the report. And so, councillors, you should have kind of read that, but so I don't need a repeat of it, Andy, but if you would like to draw us to the pertinent issues that you think you'd like most for council to consider in the recommendations, that would be good.
Will do. Thank you, councillor. I just really want to highlight and add a bit of information to a couple of the paragraphs. So, paragraph 7 just references that the community occupancy policy was scheduled to come back in April. That's going to come back in June. So just kind of highlighting that our timeframes have changed slightly in terms of when we're able to get the detail done around the policy, but it will happen by June. Paragraph number 8. So this particular report has 3 occupancy agreements, which really we're bringing before you because of the need for operating and funding considerations that the community groups have. So they've requested that we make a decision prior to the policy being completed, which is why they're before you today. Paragraph number 22, just again to reference that when I sat here with these leases last year, there were a few other leases that were on the table as well. Negotiations are still happening in terms of the Frankton Railway Hall and Enderley Park, and obviously the proposal within the 10-year plan to sell St Peter's has implications there. So today we're just dealing with 2 of those 5, even though your memory might spark to other leases when last time I sat here to talk leases with you. Paragraph number 29, just highlight an attachment to some shading has disappeared, and so if you were keen to know, the hall at Fairfield Hall and the offices are separated by external changing rooms and toilets, which will stay within the maintenance and repair control of council. They won't be part of the lease in terms of the recommendation to go to Te Whare o Te Ata. And then finally, paragraph number 38 is just in reference to age concern. Age concern does support the status quo that Grey Power presented to council in the submission last year. In fact, the wording there is probably a little bit light. Age concern's preference is the status quo, that council maintains control of the communal areas, that we maintain control of booking out that space. Though, if a decision is made, and you'll note that my recommendation is to give a full lease to age concern, they feel that they would be able to rise to the challenge, though it is stepping outside of what their current core business is, so they would have to flex and stretch in regards to that. So, though the recommendation is a full lease, their preference would be status quo, even though they are in the mix for the full lease. Happy to take any questions on any of the 3. Do note that there are 3 completely different organisations here, so in terms of voting or conversation, whether we want to go 1, 2, 3, or ask all together, I leave in your capable hands.
I didn't pick up. Age Concern. You're not that old. Do they run Senior Net, or is that a separate organisation?
So we currently within the Celebrating Age Centre have 3 leases, one with Senior Net, one with Grey Power and one with Age Concern.
Okay. So if I have
So
an
they are separate.
interest, it's not a conflict, but if I have an interest with Senior Net, that doesn't have an effect here. No. Thanks.
They are quite separate leases, but it might be that you're reasonably happy with them, but let's see what comes up in the questions. Councillor Rob, you're first.
The first question concerns all 3 leases, and that is each of the 3 leases is for 5 years. I note that the Radio Control Club previously had a 10-year lease, and I assume that Fairfield Park and Age Concern were had leases of sort. The tenants had leases of sorts, but not one lease. Have I explained that correctly?
Yes, I understand the question. So in terms of Fairfield Hall, we have not had a lease over the hall. That's been in our control, our management.
Yep.
And for the majority of Celebrating Age Centre has been within council management and booking. So those leases haven't existed. They are new leases.
So they're kind of like month to month that an organisation...
Are bookable by the hour.
Bookable, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So they're currently public space. It's bookable by the hour, half day, full day. The leases within Celebrating Age, there's been a bit of a journey with the Ferrybank development and the river plan. So their current lease is a 2-year lease because we knew that there was potential appetite to look at the way that we manage our facilities. The lease before that again was a short term because we were unsure what would happen with the Ferrybank development and what would happen with Celebrating Age as part of that. So Age Concern, Senior Net, Grey Power have had a couple of short-term 2-year leases. Fairfield's not had any lease, and I'll give to Karen for Bristol Park.
So for the Hamilton Radio Control Car Club, it was actually a licence, a 10-year licence. However, under our community occupancy policy, there's now a 5-year maximum for licence to occupy. So licence to occupy is slightly different to a lease in that it gives non-exclusive use, and therefore the land is available to the public outside of the club's use of the space.
So the council would administer that side of it, would they? The rentable time outside of the car club's specified time?
It's not booked, it's not a booked sort of space, but it's available, so the track would be available to the public, general public to use outside of the club's use of the track.
I see.
So they intend to develop a new track on the site.
Okay, so that's an unusual, all the other leases are generally what you might call a standard lease. This is a licence to occupy.
Yep.
It's
So
quite an unusual arrangement.
I wouldn't say unusual. We've got other licence to occupy.
Oh, have we? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So are these groups happy with? I suppose that we're on meeting to. Are these groups happy with the 5-year? I mean, in one case we've got one dropping from a 10-year licence to 5, and we've got 2 kind of new leases which are starting off for 5 years. Is there general agreement with the tenant, with the lessees, that they're happy with that 5-year window?
The conversations I've had with both Te Whare o Te Ata and Age Concern is they would like security of tenure. So preference would be longer term so they can make decisions about what happens in the space. And I know for Te Whare o Te Ata, they have aspirations for the building. So the longer, the better. But 5 years is definitely a commitment to seeing how the development will take place.
How well they perform.
And also it gives them assurance that actually if it's not fit for their organisation, they're not laboured with it for a really long time. It's been part of that negotiating space.
No, sounds good. In paragraphs 32, A and B, and it's almost replicated in 44A, there is the, obviously with these new single leases over the building, council appears to be wanting to make sure that there's agreement with the subtenants in terms of their access and the rates. Are you confident that you've got a good working relationship with the main tenants in both buildings, that they can arrive at an agreeable rental for the subtenants that reflects the subsidy that the council are already providing to them as main tenants?
Yes.
As lessees.
Yeah. I've really good faith in both the governance of Te Whare o Te Ata and the governance of Age Concern that they wouldn't do damage to the community for a financial gain, that they would look after the relationships that they've got. Those particular clauses are to ensure that there is a level of oversight and support that can be offered from council staff to the negotiation that takes place around money, but we do have confidence in the organisations.
Okay, and these are the two first ones off the rank, are they, in terms of major council-owned facilities where we've moved from having having a number of tenants or timed bookable spaces to having one lessee who manages the whole of the facility?
It's been a really long journey. We as a community development team have had relationships and responsibility for a few buildings over the years, which we've operated in a really different way to our strategic property unit and to our parks unit. Over the last 5 years, particularly around the community occupancy policy conversation, it was highlighted the different ways that the community were being responded to by council in regards to our buildings, and so we are bringing them into alignment. Council discussed late last year around Te Rapa Sportsdrome. That's also one of our buildings in the past, so it's kind of, these are second and third of those portfolio of 6 buildings that have sat with the community development unit over the last number of years.
Okay. Yep. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McPherson.
Thanks. And actually following somewhat the line of questioning of Rob and some of your answers, Andy, I was looking at the Te Whare o Tata Fairfield Park Hall proposal, and I totally support the work they do out there. I think it's a good fit. But I am aware of how the leasing and renting and so forth that the Te Rapa Sportsdrome currently works, and of several other community facilities that we lease out to community organisations under this policy around the place. And given that it's a significant sized hall and not just a sort of a single story building, I think there's definitely things out of kilter. I mean, we've talked about the gross floor area as determining the rent here, but this is effectively the equivalent of a 2-storey building in height, if not more. And you know, it's not, you can't equate an office footprint with a hall footprint. And you know, if you look at the Te Rapa Sportsdrome, which you've just mentioned, there's another one in that stable. Totally different sort of rental arrangements, lease arrangements there. So I'm not saying we shouldn't do this here. I'm thinking this is a good response to the community. How come it's not been like that in some other places? And if our policy's coming back, can we look at those differences? Have you got any comment on that?
We can definitely ensure that the different types of building are reflective within our community occupancy policy, because you're right, sports halls and office spaces potentially should be treated, you know, in different lights. So we can definitely make sure that's part of the policy considerations.
We've got some granularity on that with the grading of the condition of the properties, and then obviously and some of that's to do with where it's located in the city CBD or suburban. Okay. So there's some granularity, but I think what you're saying, Dave, is maybe, and that's, I think Jeff put forward the proposal when we come back to review the policy, is can we be a bit more granular on that so you don't end up with what might be perceived to be an anomaly. So I think your point's taken, and that's what the staff will be looking at.
Yeah, I'm looking at that one for the land, where they're paying half of what they are for a major building, you know, just between the two here. And I know other groups paying almost as much for land areas and versus for Fairfield Hall, which has got far more utility. I don't think our policy's right if it's delivering these results.
Yeah, I think that's what we're going to come back and have a look at. So I think the resolution was to look at some scenarios, and that's why, to be honest, it's taking us a bit longer than we thought, and that's what Andy said about the report coming back a bit later than we expected, just so that it's a bit like, you know, the rating database thing, that will come back with some different permutations, so that you guys can have a look at those, and then we can, you know, sort of try and get to the best place possible.
Sure, thank you.
Councillor Gallagher.
On the
age concern, if I've got this right, sorry, on the Celebrating Age Centre, if I've got this right, age concern will do the head lease, but would still prefer would prefer council still to be the head leasee to rent out the common space. Is that right?
That's correct. So they are willing to lease the entire 1,000 squares of the building and to be responsible for activating the space and taking bookings and all of that would come with being the head lease, as well as maintaining the relationship with other regular and permanent tenants. But their preference would be that they have a lease for their office spaces and that we negotiate leases with Senior Net and with Grey Power and with other users that we might deem to use that space well, and that we maintain the role of booking.
So how strong is their preference?
It's a strong preference.
Strong preference for status quo. What would Senior Net and Grey Power think? Thank you. Thank you. That's my question. And I'm just wondering, when we come to debate, obviously we need to test that. Madam Chair, I'm assuming there'll be some amendment that could be put up just to test that, possibly.
That's in council's hands. I am going to take them one at a time, so it will allow the opportunity for anyone to put an amendment up.
I mean, I'll be happy to listen to the GM and others. Yes. So.
Okay, so we'll move to the... apologies, Mayor Andrew.
So this Celebrating Age Centre is possibly one of our highest usage halls in our city. It has massive occupancy and it's well managed. Under this new lease arrangement, will there be enough flexibility in there for it to continue and to work as well as it does?
The long conversation around the way that we manage our facilities has often come back to the Hamilton Multicultural Services Trust and the work that they do at the Settlement Centre and the absolute humming space that is on a regular basis, both for service providers as well as being able to be booked by communities of interest. It works incredibly well.
Hang on, what are you talking about, the Settlement Centre?
The Settlement Centre, yeah. So that is, I have belief in Brent and the team at Age Concern that if they were given the lease, that there would still be incredible flexibility about the way that the building of Celebrating Age is used. I believe that the revenue that they would receive would increase because the activation would increase. I believe that it would not be a detrimental move for council to step out of the booking of hour by hour of that particular space. I think the manaakitanga that Age Concern would show users and other leases would be incredibly good. So I think the place would prosper, in my professional opinion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. So we're into the discussion. We're just going to take them in part. So the first of the recommendations by staff relates to the Hamilton Radio Control Car Club, and we haven't had anything raised in questions. Are there any concerns in the debate? If not, we would need a mover and a seconder for that. Councillor Bunting so moves, Councillor Toomans so seconds. Any debate? No, there being none. We'll go to the vote on that one. Would you like me to do it electronically or don't? Yeah, we will. Okay, here we go. That's just for one, for the A, 1, 2 and 3. Oh, there might be, there was indicated there might be a slight amendment to 1, so it'll go through. Okay?
The motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you. Now we're talking about B, which is Te Whare o Te Ata at Fairfield Park. Moves Councillor Bunting, second Councillor Casson. Is there any debate or discussion on that? No, being none, we'll go to the vote on that, please. Okay, thank you. And on to the remaining one, which is the new lease to the Age Concern Hamilton. Did you want to put an amendment, or were you just?
For discussion, I'd be interested in a focus chat. The people, we've heard from Age Concern, obviously, that they would prefer the so-called status quo. Do we look at a one-year trial, see how it works? Do we keep the status quo? And I'm asking our GM in a sense. I mean, we have an interesting thing where I can, and the settlement centre is a good example. That's not going to absolve us from dealing with their, they're obviously packed to the gunnels now, and the last night's consultation certainly threw up some challenges for us there in terms of being a partner.
So I don't want to get back into the question space, but since you've directed the GM to say whether an amendment would be useful, we'll have a reply to that, and then if you do want to make one, you can.
Well, it is significant we have a head tenant who's not particularly keen to take on that particular role.
So we had an EOI process that, we came to council with those 6 facilities, and there was a whole bunch of work done around that, and essentially the resolution of councils was for us to go to market, go out to the market, and then through the expression of interest process, and then come back and then issue a lease for those people to then run the facility instead of Andy's team running the facilities. I think you're right. What you're saying is that we're hearing that Age Concern would prefer that Hamilton City Council running the booking of the facility seems to be their preference. So it's really up to council. How true do you want to be to that original resolution around putting the 6 facilities out to the the community market to run these instead of council running them? So if you want to put an amendment to that effect, then obviously.
Well, I think this is in its own right. Yeah, it's a major community facility. Obviously, jewel in our crown. It's not to say that Age Concern could not take on that role as the lead tenant, and I'm just trying to wonder if in fact we would amend. Perhaps you could negotiate to see if they would be interested in at least trying a 1-year trial, to see how that would work. Because if it works, then it's all fine. We move on. If it's clearly not working, then we can presumably revert back to the status quo. I don't want to.
So I think where we're at though with this is that you would need to decide whether you feel strongly enough to put the amendment in that respect.
I'll give notice. Someone else put up the motion. I'll give notice amendment that I'm looking to 1-year trial.
Do we have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation as it is per staff? Thank you, Councillor Bunting. Seconder, anybody? I'll happily second. Oh, Councillor Casson. So that's as it is. Amendment. You'd like to test an amendment?
I will just amend that where it says 5 years, a 1-year trial, and then evaluation. Because you're actually making a change, which the tenants there don't particularly want, but I'm trying to be consistent with the initial policy that you moved. But I'll move that if there's I'll move that as amendment if there's a seconder to test the number, test the will.
Seconder, Councillor Hamilton will second it for you, and therefore we can have the debate.
And there may very well be a notice of motion to talk about status quo. I don't know.
Well, yeah. So we have 2. We have the motion. We have the amendment. Councillor Bunting, you moved that. You can speak. Nothing to say to it? Okay. Any points of debate? Otherwise, we're going to put the amendment up for consideration. No debate?
Could I just ask Andy, is 1 year enough for a trial period? Would 2 years be better in the sense of getting it sort of settled in, getting the new, if you like, management arrangement settled in, and then really seeing how well it works? I just wonder if 1 year, and I'm not trying to suggest that Deputy Mayor Gallagher's got it wrong. I just wonder whether 2 years.
No, look, I'm open. I'll take advice.
Might be just gives that little bit of period of set up, settling in, and operation.
Well, this is really a diversion from proper process, but if you can give us a very short, and the members seem interested, short point on that, please.
Yeah, I absolutely would agree with that. I think 1 year is possibly too short. We've got a transition period here of 4 months before 1 July, and so there will be a lot of work and conversation that takes place. Yeah, but I think 1 year is probably too short.
Okay, thank you. So having heard that, response from staff?
So just on a technical matter, to give tenure and some surety to age concern, my advice would be to issue a 5-year lease, but add in the Roman numerals for, but this arrangement be reviewed after 2 years. Because if we only issue a lease for 2 years, then they've got nothing after that. So the 5 years locks it in, and then if it doesn't work, they can either surrender the lease, or we mutually agree that they will surrender the lease, and then council take over the facility for bookings again. I think that just gives some surety to age concern that they've got some tenure over the facility.
So that would be in a change to the amendment, not the
Yeah,
substantive,
no,
because the substantive
look,
is as staff
it's a
advised.
test, but, and obviously we've got the word evaluation there.
Did you get that? So this is how we're running it. We have a mover and a seconder for as it is. We have an amendment, which is now you're going to take on board the GM's
Yes.
advice. Is that correct?
Yes.
You have a seconder, Councillor Hamilton, so you're happy with where that's going? Okay, so we do put, once it's up, we do put the amendment first, unless there's any discussion. And if that is lost, we go to the staff recommendation one, as moved by Councillor Bunting and Councillors Casson. Okay?
Sorry.
Is it a process question?
Yeah.
You've got a motion and now an amendment's been dropped on us. Do we need to be able to get our heads around?
We've already had the discussion that led to that, though. The questions were already asked. Are we entitled to ask a brand new set of questions around an amendment if it's changed?
Yeah, I think
Would for clarity.
Hear about what it is they're being asked to vote.
Okay, for clarity. So, Mayor Andrew, do you have a question around this new amendment?
Yeah, I want to know, Lance, whereabouts have you got the financial considerations for these two choices?
In the report, the current booking, we get income from bookings, is that correct, Andy? Yeah.
I mean, you've got it for the radio club. I just can't see. I mean, we've got a choice. Is there a financial reason why staff are recommending the option there?
No, it was going back a wee while, there was a review of all the community facilities that Andy's team manage, which we book out to groups and the public. And there was a decision made by council that we would go to the market so that we would lease out the facility per se to one organisation to run instead of council running them on a booking system.
Just this one?
No, there was five others, I think. I think Travis Sports Drome was one, but we did that through a bit of a different, the process with that you guys had a look at recently. Fairfield Hall, and there was a few others, wasn't there, Andy? Endley Community Centre, and a couple of others that have still got to come back here. So basically, staff have been bringing effect to a council resolution, and then I think what Deputy Mayor's done is that he's hearing that age concern may not be comfortable with that, and could this still be run by council staff instead of being run under a lease arrangement by an outside organisation? So what we're saying with the amendment, it allows that the lease happens and that age concern give it a go for a couple of years, and then if it doesn't work out, then in our review, we would actually report back to council that it hasn't worked out, occupancy hasn't been very good, it's been too much strain on age concern and the other tenants, subtenants in there, and then we could revert back to council running it if that's what we choose.
So at the moment, do we have a staff member down there?
No, we have a centralised person who does other work but also does bookings for various council facilities. It's not a huge part of their work, but
So they're back in this building?
Yeah, they're part of Karen's team actually now, so, yeah.
So do Age Concern feel trapped that if they didn't put up a request to take the head lease, they might lose it altogether, and so they've done that under duress for fear of them not controlling the building anymore? Like at the moment they have.
So there was a long conversation around the EOI process. Age Concern believe that they can do this, but their preference and support of the other two tenants that are currently there was to do status quo. They're not against the idea of having the head lease. There's obviously a bit of a change of scope, and so there'll be some things to practice and to get used to, but they're not against the idea of being the head lease. They don't feel they've been forced into this situation. They still believe they would be able to do the best for the entire building for our aged population.
Thank you.
Okay, so everybody understands where we're headed. We're going to put the amendment first, because I have asked for debate and there was none. There is now. Oh, sorry, let me press discussion. Okay, Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, I just like what you've suggested, Lance, about the 2-year review and flow of everything that's gone on, and potentially it sets a precedent for other 5-year leases going forward, to just have that 2-year buffer as a safety net.
Councillor Gallagher?
Yeah, I mean, the settlement centre's been great, but obviously, from my understand, both their board of governance and their staff are happy and wanted that arrangement of doing it really well. And as I said, that does not absolve council of ongoing discussion with groups such as this in terms of capital assistance as the pressure grows on those facilities, as we picked up last night, our LTP consultation process. This is a kind of a compromise which is consistent with your policy, but I do want our staff to be very proactive in discussions with Age Concern, and frankly, if even before that 2-year period things were just not working adequately or there was stress, also we would need to, in my view, factor that in terms of any council financial assistance, because if they're doing this role, and albeit they're the lead tenant, then obviously that's a factor. That's an extra administration for them and on them. So if things were not working, even after a few months, I'd be open to you advising us, and if things were not working, I would assume automatically that Age Concern would be immediately, politely advising council that this arrangement that has in effect been imposed upon them is just not coming together. Now, hopefully, it may end up being a win-win. I don't know, but I am still nervous.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Turman.
Look, the way I see it is, currently, of course, you've got 3 tenants basically down there. The head lease, of course, is going to Celebrating Age, and then I noticed there under paragraph 37 that the Grey Power organisation was a little bit concerned, and they made a submission in the 17-18 annual plan. And then Senior Net are pretty silent on the whole thing. Is the system broken? I don't think so. So why are we trying to fix it? That's it.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody? Oh, Councillor McPherson.
Yeah, look, I just want to say, on reflection, I think I support the amendment of Deputy Mayors. There are a couple of groups in this city that if we do get things wrong, we'll certainly hear all about it from them, and one of them is going to be one of the sub-tenants there. So I think we definitely need the possibility of a flexible possibility, the way of getting out. I was actually speaking to another group who hires it on occasion. It's not mentioned there, probably don't hire it often enough, once a month or something, down there on Saturday, and they were pretty full, pretty much filled up the front room that they had down there, and Someone else suggested that they should actually be using the back room, but the cost was too high, so I would hope that lots of those sorts of issues, and it was for a group of mainly elderly people, that was quite important. So if anything does go wrong, there just should be a way of getting out of it earlier than the end of the lease period, I think.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So we're voting on the amendment first. Thank you. Pardon? Oh, can we clear it, please? No, it's not. Yeah, I am. I am. So I just wanted to give them certainty of the fine. Yeah. Has anybody forgotten to press? Oh.
The amendment is carried, 9 for, 3 against.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. That brings us on to... Oh, gosh. I thought, it becomes a standard motion, that's right, of course it does. Then we'll vote now. Makes it easier this time round. Okie doke. There you go.
The motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you. That does now bring us on to the second to last item of the day. And I'm the Central City Safety Strategy. That was, of course, under the leadership of staff and Councillor O'Leary. So I'm not sure if Councillor O'Leary, you would like to say a few words in the lead-in or just leave it over to staff? Okay, as long as you're happy with that. So thank you for the leadership that you've had over this one, Councillor O'Leary, and we'll, you have had it, so I think you've got a little, have you got us a little PowerPoint slide as it on my notes or not?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you. All right, well, we'll start. Thanks.
I know you're keen to get going, so I'll move through this as quickly as possible. It's just for the benefit of those people who weren't part of the task force and who might need a little bit of extra context on how we've arrived where we've arrived. So just a bit of background quickly. The first Hamilton Central City Safety Plan launched in September 2014. So at that point in time, there were some reasonably significant issues that it was trying to address. A good amount of antisocial behaviour, some legal highs, and we had a lot of significant concerns at that point from lots of business owners in the CBD. Do want to make the point that these are really complex issues that we're dealing with, that cities across the country and across the whole world are grappling with how to deal with these issues, and there aren't easy answers. So the last plan, it did take a collaborative approach. So the solutions that have worked the best are ones that we've got organisations working together. So a lot of those organisations have expertise and resources that council don't have, basically, and they can bring those things to the table. So we had some really good successes under the last plan. It did win a local government, a Government New Zealand award, and we've had some quite big improvements in terms of the crime statistics in the space. And also just to note that we actually are regularly contacted by other councils around the country. So we're actually seen as leading the way in this area. So we get constant requests from other councils asking for advice and asking how our current plan works. So we do want to retain what is already working well. We are suggesting a change from what we had before. And so we are moving into a strategy rather than an action plan, and we have got some good reasons for that. So if you go to the slide that says why a strategy, and you'll just see some of the points there. So basically, a strategy does allow staff to be agile and flexible. So instead of just having a list of tasks, it basically allows staff to respond to issues as they arise. Okay, it engages the whole organisation and not just the business units that have assigned actions. And it does mean that we can add projects as we go. Hopefully that makes sense. Just a quick overview of the key content. So we've got three main goals, and then underneath each of those goals we've got some high-level strategic priorities. So the first goal is around collaboration and partnership. So that's something that is working really effectively already, so we want to make sure that continues. Council alone can't solve these issues. We need to be working with the police, we need to be working with mental health and addictions. So all of those partnerships are quite key. We want to make sure that we're encouraging vibrancy and that the design of our public spaces are safe and using best practice. So that's another one of our goals. And then obviously we also, where council can enforce is around our policies and bylaws. So we want to make sure that when those are reviewed, that central city safety is a top priority there. And then the last slide is probably one that you'll be the most interested in. So this talks a little bit to how this is actually going to work and hang together. So the Central City Safety Strategy will sit alongside the other city strategies. It'll be owned by Community Development and City Safe, and what that means is that those units are the champions for that strategy. So they're going to go out and broker relationships with the other business units within the organisation, and also with some of the external agencies that we already work with the businesses that are in the area. And basically they'll be the champions for the actions they'll be involved in the monitoring and, you know, keeping track of all of it and making sure that it's being implemented. So there's underneath that you'll see there's a range of areas in terms of how we will generate actions. So I've got a box there for councillor input, and as a task force we did agree that after the strategy has gone through that there would be an interested group of councillors who are wanting to contribute further to developing actions for the plan. As we have confirmed LTP projects coming online, we'd find some actions coming out of there, and at that point we'd be working with business units on their work plans. And then whatever emerging issues and new projects come up from the community itself as well. So those are kind of all areas that we would be looking at every 12 months, and that would form an annual action plan, which then gets presented to council. So hopefully, I've been very speedy. Hopefully I didn't talk too fast. Yeah, happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mallett.
Ben, thank you for your time you spent with me the other day on this. Just going right down onto the street level, and I'm just concerned we talk focusing, and I do believe you've got to start off with a strategy, but I presume all of our staff are still well trained on procedures, like when they come to a bloke who's being obstropolous or vomiting or punching people and carrying on, our staff have some reasonably steady, strong policy or procedures they go through.
Yeah, so I would consider that to come under business as usual. So business as usual will continue unchanged. So this strategy
We're out there decking it out with these blokes, are we? Duking it out.
So this strategy is more looking at new projects and things that are additional to what we do already. So the service that City Safe provides and the excellent ability that they have to deal with those things will continue.
Yeah, so we're not taking away from that, making sure our frontline staff understand what, like, protected from a legal point of view, protected from a physical point of view. Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Councillor Pascoe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You mentioned, Debbie, that this is moving from an action plan to a strategy. Sounds sort of quite posh, and it might have some increased costs attached to it. There's nothing in the report that suggests that this change is going to cost us any more. Is that a fair? Have I answered my own question?
You have. So the good thing about a strategy is it gives you the ability to be flexible. So we can actually work within the existing budgets. So for example, as say rubbish bins are renewed within Central City, which is part of our renewals budget, that becomes that they have to take into account the principles of the strategy and look at ways of making those rubbish bins a design that works well. So we can we can work with, you know, what we've got already, basically.
Okay. Did the task force consider, I mean, you know, I've seen it grow from zero to what it's done over the last 4 years, and certainly it's you know, has been a successful project as far as the central city is concerned. Did the task force consider whether there could be a sharing of costs with city businesses? Because I know some city businesses do employ security, and you know, perhaps the benefits of an enhanced service does provide increased benefits from the business point of view.
No, that there's a number of members of the task force here, but that wasn't a consideration and it wasn't discussed. The interesting point that you make, though, about you were drawing the inference about businesses and their security costs.
Yep.
And I guess if you're talking about CitySafe is not a security force, and it's not there to replicate or replace the security provisions that any individual shop business may decide to put in place.
Understand that. The comment was really around the visibility gives some of those businesses a little more a certainty and a surety. Now, I understood that this group, the central, if we call it a central, a central city safety strategy, so, some of these people actually go out to the suburban shopping centres and to Hamilton East. Am I correct in my understanding that it's not just the central city, it's other parts of the city being serviced by this group?
This is the central city safety strategy, and it deals with the central city. What we have is we have always had a small one-person patrol within CitySafe who has gone out to visit all of our outlying shops, principally being the initial conduit with those people, often English second language speakers, helping them get to know their neighbours, helping them to put in place crime prevention plans, but that is very different in terms of the service offerings to what we're talking about in the central city.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
That's
still business as usual.
That's continuing.
Correct.
Okay, but was not part of this review at all as to whether you would increase it or take it away or... Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, so Councillor O'Leary might like to make a few comments in general about that, that and other matters, and then we'll look for you'll move it?
Yes, I'll move it, Madam Chair. Yeah, just on the journey, I want to thank the members of the group, of the task force, who officially were myself, Councillor Bunting, Councillor Casson, Councillor Taylor and Mayor Andrew, and also those members that attended regularly, which was yourself, Madam Chair, Councillor Henry and Councillor Pascoe. Also to staff, thank you very much for the work that you've done. It's really appreciated. I think we were, the journey through to get to this point, we were struggling for the first few meetings. We all had some ideas of things that we wanted to do, but I don't think we were really understanding why we wanted to do them and the impact of them. So going into Christmas, I thought it was a prudent thing for staff to, and they did this on their own back, to go away and have a think about that work and then come back with a strategy. And yeah, look, I'm certainly not going to debate, but there's nothing in here that inhibits all of those things that were brought up, and I've certainly got a list of what everybody mentioned, and I've got my own list as well. So I think that going the way that we are with an action plan coming, certainly a draft of one coming in August is a good way to do it. And I think the point that Debbie made to the group was actually this enables the entire organisation to respond rather than a set of lists that can be confining, as a staff member may look at a list and go, well, I'm not on that specifically, so I won't respond to that issue. So I think that that's important, and that's what you've done. So I appreciate the work that and the time that you've all spent on this. Thank you.
Councillor Bunting?
Seconded if that's right, and if I could just briefly speak.
Yeah,
that wasn't my debate.
It wasn't your debate?
No.
Oh my goodness, it's going to be cracking.
We haven't quite got into debate.
I'll wait for the debate.
But second it, that's great. Are there any more questions on it? Questions? Otherwise we will go into debate. Yep, so we're in debate now. Councillor O'Leary has moved it and Councillor Bunting has seconded it. Councillor O'Leary, you spoke. Is there anything you would like to add in debate? Potts should be careful of calling people kiddies.
It's been an interesting journey for me. On my time on council, we've moved towards strategies. We've gotten rid of strategies. We've moved to action plans. We're moving. Well, this one anyway. This is the first strategy of this council, and I think, as I said in my preface, doing it this way draws a line in the sand. And actually, what it does is it says, what we're doing, what we've done in the past and what we've achieved has been successful. We want to continue with City Safe and the great work that we have been doing, but we want the entire organisation to respond every day in every way in everything that they do, and I think that that's really important. When I think back to strategies like that I know are sort of sitting in the background for us, like Active Hamilton strategy, there are some of us that didn't want to throw that one out, and I think that's coming back to us. If I look over my 10-year journey, strategies can either mean a lot and we respond really well, or we can sort of be locked into smaller action plans. So I think, yes, we did win an award, but actually for me, all of the things that the working group, the 3 key priorities that the working group spoke of around having a vibrant city and supporting it, having key partnerships, and keeping an eye on enforcement are in here at a really strong level. And cities, I think there's one coming next week. Manurewa, South Auckland are coming back to us again, and it's just constant that people want to know what we did and how we did it. And we are, honestly, we need to be really proud of the work that we have done. We are streets ahead. I'm not saying that because I led this project. We actually are. And LGNZ have actually asked me to speak at their conference this year in front of 600 odd delegates on this as well, along with the People's Project and a whole section around community safety and community initiatives. And that's because of the work that we've done together. So we actually should be really proud of this. Of course, the next focus for us is how we tackle the suburbs, and that's another conversation.
Actually, sorry, because you got pressed off the list, Mayor King is next. It won't matter, I'm sure. Councillor Bunting, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a really interesting journey being as a part of this group, because every single one of us in that group had very, very strong feelings, as we all do around this table. We all had our own perceptions of what should be done, how it should be fixed. Most of us agreed the police should be doing more, except for the police. Then, I have my own views on it. I think City Safe eventually would be great to be merged with the parking force, thereby doubling their numbers and sharing their workload. But that's just an idea for the future. And what I like about this, Debbie and staff, is that you've taken us out of the equation and put us where we should be, and that is devising the strategy, rather than putting our fingers in the pie. Don't worry, Calvin, you're not off the hook yet. My fingers are going to be well and truly in this pie. Because I'm really looking forward to further involvement in it. But I think what you have done is hauled it into what it ought to be, and I love the fact that it's an overarching strategy, which is very cool. What I like the most about it, though, is the fact that this one involves the community, and I think that's the missing link in city safety and security, that the community who are demanding safety and security are also responsible for safety and security. The fact that is that 5 different members of the community might walk past a beggar on the street and give a different response is actually one of our weaknesses as a city. If we all combine as a community and do the same thing, we have a much better chance of eradicating antisocial behaviour around the place. But the fact is, people don't know what to do. People have their own ideas on what to do. So if they, that's why I applaud the likes of You Help May Harm and all those sort of campaigns, because it brings the community into being an active part of the response to the problem. So thank you for hauling us into line. I'm really excited about being involved down the track with this, if I'm invited, and I'm really excited about being involved with it, even if I'm not invited. So thank you.
Thank you. Mayor King was actually next, if you don't mind waiting. James, Mayor King.
So when I came to work this morning on the footpaths of the city, there were 2 people sleeping in doorways. This isn't fixed. It'll never be fixed. There's the vulnerable out there and there's the unstable out there, and this is an ongoing area that we need to look at. this is public space, and these people do have rights, and we have to be careful in the way that we handle these, what we actually don't like seeing. And really what I want to say is, if it wasn't for the groups that work with these vulnerable people, our city and our Western world would be a shambles. And there are groups who are out there most nights who step out and look after these people, and do what they can for these people, and put into these people's lives, both physically, spiritually, and just look after these people. So there's no easy answer here. There's no quick fix here. We haven't fixed it. It's we're doing it probably better than a lot of people are doing it, but it's something that we have to continue to work with. And I think one of the major areas here is working with these not-for-profit groups and these people who actually care for the needy and care for the vulnerable and care for the unstable. Thank you.
Councillor Casson.
Yeah, thank you, guys, for the strategy, city safety strategy. Look, what better people to run this than an ex-Waikato Police District Commander who knows, he's got a lot of background on people in our city and everything else. So congratulations there. Look, when I ran for council in 2016, one of my platforms was the vagrants, one of the bloody well banes of my life, those people, and a lot of people in Hamilton. And I've dedicated myself to try and get rid of those people from town, not only from town, from hanging around Hamilton totally. And I still, sometimes when I'm walking to work, get the greetings from a lot of them, good morning, officer, when I walk into town. Look, it's a good start. The plan's a good start, and the old saying is failing to plan is planning to fail, and we have to have somewhere to start. So this strategy is a good start, but there's a lot more work to do here, and once we get out into the suburbs, we can do a lot more. But there is obviously there's a lot of feeling at the moment in the community about inactivity or on part of council or police, whether that's fair or unfair, I'm not sure, but at least we're doing something now and we're getting some cooperation from the police, which is really good. So it is a good start. Just saying that when I was running for council and I had the policy of getting rid of vagrants, I got a horrible text message from, I don't know, it was just a random number to me asking when one of the vagrants was killed down by the river, if that was one of my policy plans. So I didn't answer it. I wasn't sure who had sent it to me, but I thought that was quite horrible. But we only have really one true vagrant or one true homeless person in the city centre now, and the rest are hangers-on. So these people are not, I wouldn't class them as people that are homeless. They do have homes to go to. They do have social agencies looking after them. It is a choice thing that they come into town. They choose to come into town because people give them money, people give them food. And the sooner we can get that out to the public that they should not be doing that, then you'll find these people start wandering off.
Thank you. I'd just like to say a couple of words myself and note my thanks also to staff. Now, I wasn't formally on that working group, but I attended every one of them because it's such an important topic, and I was really keen to be part of the debate and hear what was going on. And credit to Councillor O'Leary for the way that she ran a very inclusive process. We were all equally welcome to participate in that, and so I'm grateful for that opportunity and having the diverse group of skills around because, as people have already said, this is not something that Hamilton City Council, antisocial behaviour and uncomfortable behaviour in public spaces is not something that we alone can fix. And it's a blend of social problems and other problems as well, economic problems and a variety of things. But where we are doing, I like the way that it's a strategy, because where we are doing our everyday business, if we can weave in an awareness and understanding of safety at the same time, whether that's in the design of a public space or the positioning of seating, the type of lighting, All of those kind of things can make a difference, number of safety cameras and so forth. If we can do that as we go on, then we're playing our role, because we can't do what the social agencies can do and are doing, as Mayor Andrews says, a very good job in our city. I just want to make a comment about the other areas of town. This is a central city plan, but make no bones about it, we all had a really good conversation about what's happening in the other suburbs, especially other shopping centres, and we are mindful of that, and we do need to continue those conversations with the stakeholders in our suburbs, because criminal activity moves around, antisocial activity moves around. It also changes in form. What's currently happening in Hamilton will not be the same as what's happening in another 5 years. So all credit to the really good relationship that we have with the police, and we can keep ahead of the trends, and I think that's a really good thing. So all in all, a good process, and I look forward to listening to Councillor O'Leary and Julie when they attend the LGNZ conference in Christchurch on our behalf. Thank you, everyone. So we will now go to the vote, which is it's actually approval. Okay. And the list will come back, and actions, specific actions, we'll have more talk on that in August. Okay, thank you, everyone. And we're voting.
The motion is passed unanimously.
Congratulations, everyone. You can go and celebrate now, chocolate or whatever it is that you celebrate with. Okay, thank you. We're now moving into public excluded. If we can have someone so move, I'll move. Seconder, Councillor Casson. All in favour? Yes. So we'll just wait for the public